I'm going to be interviewing Katrina, and I'm really interested to just see her sort of perspective as a female Team Fortress 2 player in the competitive community, sort of get some insight into what that's been like for her, any of her experiences on the matter, sort of. I know everybody's gonna kind of gonna have like a different experience on the matter, but I feel like it's always interesting to just have more perspective. In addition, though, she's just been a pretty big mentoring figure in the Team Fortress 2 community in recent times, especially in the RGL era, though, and I feel like there's a lot of experiences we can touch on there. And yeah, those will probably be the topics we talk about. Do you want to introduce yourself a bit, Katrina?
I suppose I should. Hello, I am Katrina. I have been a Team Fortress 2 competitive soldier slash demo, mostly demo, for 20 seasons or so. I started in the UGC season 17 as a Highlander soldier playing on an Xbox 360 controller. That was a thing that happened. And then from season 19 UGC up through season 12 of RGL, I'm a demo main. I've also done some sixes, not really anything worth talking about. I hate sixes. I have been mentoring for a billion seasons as well, because I like getting newer people into the community. And aside from that, I don't really do a lot. I'm not trying to climb the divs. I am an advanced demo. I chill here. It's very entertaining.
Okay, so how did you initially start getting into competitive? What sort of was your motivation and experience there?
So, I started Team Fortress 2 on the Xbox 360, hence the Xbox 360 controller. My dad installed Team Fortress 2 onto my laptop and got me a controller that I could plug into it so that I could play in the updated version of the game, because if anyone knows, the console versions never got any updates because they wanted them to be paid DLC. Valve didn't want that, they wanted them to be free. Anyway, I started TF2 on the computer during the Scout update when they added the Force of Nature for the first time. It was very spectacular. When I got onto the computer, I very much sucked at Team Fortress 2, because it turns out pointing and clicking is much easier than the controller controls. I also wasn't used to larger server sizes, because the most that they had on console was 8v8. You couldn't even do Highlander. I had a long learning curve that really started with me, not being good, then playing a bunch of modded stuff and silly things like Prop Hunt and Dodgeball. What other game modes did they have back in? Freeze Tag? That was a silly one. Played a lot of mods like Versus Saxton Hale, and then I eventually moved back to regular pub servers. This was probably 3,000, 4,000 hours into the game. I eventually met a competitive player, and they got me into comp by meeting another pub player of mine, a friend of mine, convincing him to get into competitive, and then they dragged me into it with them. From that point on, I was pretty much always a leader of teams I joined. I was a leader of my first team in name only, really. Queen of England, as I called it, where you are definitely a leader. You have the leadership tag next to your name. You don't actually do anything leaderly. You don't set up scrims. You don't find players. You just kind of hang out, look important. From then on, I have been pretty much a leader or leader figure of every team I've joined, because I've been a main caller. It's harder to be a leader from Soldier, but when you're the demo, you're kind of like given leadership role, even if you don't do anything to earn it, so.
That's fair. And how was it like being mentored initially? What was your sort of experience with that in the UGC day?
Oh, so my very first competitive friend who got me into the game was my mentor. I will not be naming him at this point, because I don't really know if anyone would remember him anyway, and also for privacy reasons. Not that I care, but I don't know, someone might care. My first mentor was a silver demo who went undefeated in his first season. Or not his first season, but undefeated in the first season I had met him. And then they went straight to platinum after, when gold was a thing. Remember that gold was a thing? Man, I'm old.
Yep.
So he mentored me but he was also a sociopath, and I'm not, like, making that up. I'm not saying he treated me poorly, therefore he's a sociopath. Nah, he legit came clean one night, and he's like, I care about, like, 2 people in this world, and the rest of them could die for all I care. He did not experience emotions of happiness. The only emotions he really had were anger and egotism. You know, like the full of himself sort of happiness, that pride.
Right.
He very much tried to make it feel like my success relied upon him. He was sometimes very nice and empathetic toward me, because I was one of the few people he did care about. But he also would try to, like, make me feel guilty for being anywhere else doing anything else than hanging out with him, learning how to play Team Fortress 2 with him, or playing some other games with him. Very unhealthy first experience, though he did teach me a lot. I won't deny, he was a fantastic demo man at the time. Not a good experience, though. I ended up cutting him out of my life, then going out on my own. He told me I'd always plateau if I didn't listen to him, and I did. I did plateau for quite a long time. He was absolutely correct, because I kind of refused guidance after that, because I didn't want my success or failures to be reliant upon a person. I wanted it to be reliant upon me, so I own my successes, I own my failings. I don't really care if I get nowhere, as long as I do it myself, you know?
Right. Like, after that sort of manipulative experience, it's just kind of hard to be as trusting of other people who are, like, trying to guide you, yeah?
Yeah, especially when I truly believe in the majority of the competitive community. I don't claim sexism. I don't claim any ulterior motives. However, there were definitely some players that I had met that are like, oh, I could totally help you out in particular and not your team. I'm like, huh. I wonder why just me is interesting to you. Maybe I'm the one that needed the most help, but I definitely got some players to, like, say, oh, I will come out of retirement to be on your team for no reason whatsoever. I'm like, this is really sketchy, isn't it?
Yeah, just a tiny bit. So,
yeah.
Yeah, so that definitely, like, impacted you for a lot of your playing career, yeah?
Oh, honestly, it didn't last all that long. But I stayed with my first team for 5 seasons, where we went Iron, Steel, Silver. After the Silver season, my team collapsed, and I joined another team. And that team also collapsed pretty early, so I joined yet another team.
So, Settlers of Kanto Season 21 Silver, The Fireplace Season 22 Silver, then Blackjack and Hookers Season 23 Silver?
Indeed. So I was with Settlers of Kanto from Season 17 through 21. In that Season 21, I made a mistake, and I picked up some players that were toxic. They basically said, cut your medic, who was my co-leader, or we are leaving the team. And I didn't really have any options, so I cut my medic, and then he threatened to commit suicide, and I was actually called from the hospital in which he had intentionally crashed his motorcycle. That was an event that occurred in my lifetime, yep.
Huh, that's not something everybody can say.
Yeah, my medic did, in fact, call me from the hospital after he intentionally crashed his motorcycle. It wasn't like the TF2 team was the reason why he tried to kill himself. He had other things going on in his life. The pressure was building, and it was just kind of a final straw to be ousted from yet another thing he enjoyed, especially when it was because of toxic players. I was in an awkward situation. I didn't know what to do, and that made it incredibly worse. After that, he basically asked me to leave the team and rebuilt it for the next season, and I did. I joined a team that was actually Alpha Orionis in Season 22. It died, I think, week 4, and then I joined the Fireplace as a sub demo. Then I after that season, joined B&H after being invited by B&H Paul. He was a good friend of mine throughout the entire time because of, well, I scrimmed B&H constantly.
The man, the myth, the legend, B&H Paul.
So B&H used to be led by a player that I can't even remember the original name of. The dude was a little crazy. Paul could give you more details if you run into him. I honestly can't remember much about the dude, but I remember he was crazy dedicated to TF2 to the point where I think he was like skipping high school classes to play TF2 and that sort of thing. He ended up leading B&H into the ground, and then Paul wanted to revive it for a season, so I joined it after that to be the demo. And B&H had a fairly successful season in spite of us all not really knowing what we were doing in Silver, especially me. My first experience in Silver, I was being carried by a couple of players on my team. I didn't feel like I contributed anything. When I joined B&H, I let them know I did not want to be a team leader after my previous experiences. I just had done too much incorrectly and stuff, even though Paul was willing to give me co-lead. I also asked that I was allowed to make my own mistakes and not have a mentor and just learn as I go, try to figure things out for myself because of the previous experience I had of both. He agreed. And so I was on B&H as not a leader, but definitely very quickly became, the main caller half leader thing.
Right.
And also their team counselor, more like team mom. I was their team mom. I'm still listed in their Discord as mom. Because I had a little bit more life experiences than the players there. I was older than them. I was in college. They were in high school, that sort of thing.
Right.
So whenever things were coming up that I needed to help them work through, I was perfectly happy to give them advice on the things I felt confident in. I don't give advice on things I don't really trust myself to give advice on. However, emotional life stuff, I survived it. So.
And you said that was something like Paul's kind of understanding of, just like not wanting to lead again, just needing to make your own mistakes for a bit. Would you say other community members, like in future teams and whatnot, were kind of understanding as well?
So, when it comes to teams I'm mentoring, you mean, or just in general?
Like the teams you're playing with, the teams you're mentoring, I guess, yeah, just like your community interactions in general.
Community interactions in general. These days, I still don't have a mentor. I still am just winging it, figuring out things on my own. When I join a team, I try to... I'm obviously the main caller, so I tell them what to do. I try to listen to advice from my teammates, incorporate their things. I don't mind doing that, but I don't want someone telling me, everything you're doing is wrong because I am superior demo and you are doing things wrong.
Right.
When it comes to leadership these days, I'm very confident in it. I don't feel like I'm doing things horribly wrong because I'm not making the same mistakes I made. That's kind of how it goes.
That's definitely fair. You've had a lot of success with just like leading teams in the past, having those teams be stable. I definitely say that's something you can positively look back on. So, what was it like leading back then? What was the sort of like leadership culture compared to RGL today?
Honestly, it is so similar. By and large, it's so similar, and that is a negative thing, I want to say, because you'll notice a lot of teams are one and dones, or 1 and 0.5 and dones, like they're not actually surviving the season. A lot of times they just create a team, dies week 4, all their players go on to other teams, they try to sandbag a team to win it all. It's just a repeating cycle of nonsense, and I think it's stupid. I personally believe, which you can get into my controversial opinions whenever you'd like, I personally believe there should be leadership-based penalties where if your teams have died 2 seasons in a row before completing the season, you're done leading. Like, just, we're done. But then, of course, everyone tells me, well, then they'll just have someone else, like, quote-unquote, lead the team. They'll have someone else do all the sign-up stuff for RGL, and it'll be the same thing. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but it would just make me feel better if there was some sort of penalty for it, right?
Right. Do you feel like UGC and RGL like worked with you as like enough as a leader? Like, was there proper like infrastructure and logistics in place? Was there like anything like that? Like maybe you could go to the leagues for support if your team was having trouble. Like, what was your sort of experience along those lines?
Oh, so back when I was in UGC and my very first team, my medic was my leader, and he would submit scores, and he'd submit scores backwards because that's a thing that happens a lot. And he would send a message to Komori saying, "Hey, Komori, I messed up submitting my scores. I'm really sorry. Could you help me fix them? Here are the logs." And she called him retarded. And yeah, that was the experience. She legit insulted him in that manner and used the word that we do not use these days. I don't know if that is something that should be bleeped or anything for the sake of this interview. However, that is what she said to my leader. On top of that, when it happened then again the very next week, she was still very unhappy about this in a similar manner. Now, these days, RGL, I don't interact with the admins a whole lot, but I know that they have standards of things that they can't, insult their player base.
Right.
They can't be entirely disrespectful, and they also generally make better decisions. Komori is, of course, a very well-known figure in the olden days. Maybe people don't know who she is now. She was the UGC head admin back in the day. Literally, any decision had to go through her, no matter how small. It was pathetic. It was really, really annoying, because there were some very, very good admins like Jacobo. I loved that guy, silver admin for 1 billion years. And he wasn't allowed to make decisions. It would eventually come to her. And I don't know if she was just the sort of person to go on power trips, but here's an example of something that happened in my past. Back on Alpha Orionis in my very first season with them, very first week of the season with them, we encountered a team. We joined their server for our first match, and the server is in Japan.
What?
What? So we joined the server, and we're like, okay, the server is giving all of us 200 ping. And for some godforsaken reason, there's no config on, but it's like less than no config on. Like, I don't even know how to describe what was on, because it was like sort of SOAP DM, but you could spawn in the wrong places, like other people's spawns and stuff, and I don't really know what was going on there.
Okay.
Anyway, we immediately, upon getting into the situation, I tell Elite, the leader at the time, like, hey, don't bother talking with them, just get an admin right away and say, hey, they're being stupid. They're going to probably continue to be stupid. Can you just be here? So we messaged Jacobo, and Jacobo said, yeah, sure, I will help talk with this other team's leader for you. And so we have a server, and we tell Jacobo, hey, we have a server, can we just make them join it? And Jacobo says, yeah, sure, I'll try to do that. So we all join our server. They get very, very salty about it. They actually got a different regular North American server, and they want to play on that instead. So we're like, okay, we'll join their server, because Jacobo had been arguing with them, and they refused to join ours. So we joined their server, and then they have 8 players in there. And then we send a message to Jacobo saying, like, can we even ready up on this? Like, they're down players. Are they going to try to claim that we forced them to play down players now? And Jacobo's just like, oh my god, just start playing, okay? So we go to ready, and then they start leaving the server. And we're like, what the hell? What is it now? And he's like, So they're claiming that you're trying to force a forfeit, but I've been here the entire time and they're being a-holes and wasting my time. So what I'm going to do is say, you forfeit one. And I say, okay, sweet. Woo, we won the first match. And everyone's like, sweet, we're done. We're tired of this. We gotta go on to the next week. And then Kumori shows up. And Kumori's like, excuse me, this match has to be played. And we say, what? And she's like, yeah, you really need to play out this match. You know, the admin was being so mean to that other team that they had to come to me and they were like, oh my god, this admin was bullying us. And yeah, so you're going to need to reschedule. So we rescheduled the match to, I think, Wednesday. And we show up on Wednesday. And I actually still have the quote from when this happened because it was just so funny to me. Here, let me find it really quick. I don't swear, so you're gonna have to read this aloud to your viewership.
Sure.
Here we are. This is what I received from their leader. And all of those hearts are actually swear words.
MW Magic LFT, you win. Teams...
effing...
Okay, team's fucking dead. Sure made a team with 4...
effing...
fucking mains and 17 fucking roster riders. Holy fuck.
That was the team that Kumori made us reschedule against.
And what possible motivation do you think Kumori had for just doing this, for doing like all the things?
She liked just making matches get played, and she liked overturning other people's decisions. She liked when her decision was the thing that went through. She liked being the head admin. I don't have any other explanation for that situation, because it's very, very obvious that they weren't going to play. Anyone that came across that situation would understand they are not going to play. They were being entirely unreasonable. They started on a frickin' Japan server. They started on a Japan server. Like, haha, funny meme. Just give us the right connect info 2 minutes into it instead of 17 minutes into it, instead of 30 minutes into it, and maybe we'd get somewhere. This team was never going to play. Everyone that hears this knows they weren't going to play. The punchline is this team is going to die either way. Yet, Kumori decided, man, wouldn't it be great if we made them play anyway?
So, do you think it'd be fair to say it was just about, like, control with Kumori, about just having the final say in things, being able to influence things?
Yes.
And
Kumori was heavily bullied in the community, and in return, she just went on power trips whenever the hell she felt like it. It was unhealthy, it was terrible, everyone knew it was a thing that was happening. I will say, myself, personally, never had a single bad interaction with Kumori. I also will say that I hardly ever talked with her. She did this. Yeah, like, she definitely overturned this. I didn't get into a huge explosive argument with her about how stupid she was or anything, so I was on good terms with her.
Okay.
But, like, I never had, like, a negative interaction where she insulted me, she called me bad things, anything like that. But, yeah, she did that, and that was pretty stupid.
So, what did UGC do about this?
What do you mean? The team died and then we got our forfeit?
No, I mean about Kumori, about just, like, the decisions she was making.
Okay, so, eventually, nothing happened, eventually, to Kumori, and she stepped down, and then the admin was replaced by Zabi, and this is where I'll talk about a little bit more of the goings-on in UGC. So Fornot is the owner of UGC. He doesn't do anything, but he likes things happening his way regardless, because he's the one that funds the stuff, right?
Right.
Fornot had Zabi become the main admin, and, like, the head admin of everything. Like, she had to set up matches for all of NA, all of South America, all of Australia, New Zealand, all of the Asian leagues. She was the only person setting up the matches and being a general admin for that, except for Europe, because Europe has its own stuff, and Europe UGC is actually pretty good from what I hear.
Yeah, they play some alternative maps, not as nearly as respected as ETF12, but people enjoy it from time to time as a side thing, yeah. It's just not usually the priority.
Now, I'm going to disclose some stuff about what happened that I know makes UGC a godforsaken league.
Okay.
So Zabi was head admin, and she used to confide in me some stuff that would happen because I don't know if it's just because we were both women or because we were about the same age and had generally the same temperament or stuff. But she was the head admin of everything, and I offered, like, hey, I don't know exactly what I'm doing, but if you want to teach me how to be an admin and get some support on this, I'm up for it. And I said that I could help find some other people that are generally seen as, respectable in the community, because I know I wasn't respectable in the community at that point. But I'm like, I know some people that are, and I can offer to them the ability to get the adminship. And she said, no, I can't. Fortnite won't let me have any more admins. And I'm like, you're the only person that anyone can talk to about anything for all of North America. So that'd be steel, silver, and platinum. And all of New Zealand, Australia, all of the Asian and South American leagues. You're literally the only person they can go to for any match disputes, any player sandbagging, anything. And she's like, yep. And Fortnite won't let you have anyone else. Nope. I'm like, okay. That's insane. That is incredibly insane, you understand? And she's like, yep, but I'm it. If I am not the admin, there is no one else. He's not going to get anyone else. I don't know what to do, but I don't want the league to die with me. And I'm like, okay.
That's a lot of responsibility for one person.
A couple of weeks later, a lot of things happen with Zabi. Zabi starts banning players for using the funny word, the N-word. A lot of players she starts banning for general toxicity, disrespect, all of the stuff that RGL is now prided for doing. She was the only person doing it, so she was the target of all of the harassment for all of the toxic players being banned. Any toxic players' friends would come after her. All of the toxic players themselves would come after her. She was honestly she was driven insane by this. She was losing her mind. And that was not even the biggest thing going on in the background that Fortnite was allowing to happen. She came to me and she said, hey, I have been contacted by some women in the community that say they were being blackmailed with their nudes by a player. And I'm like, that's horrifying. That's terrible. And she's like, do you know anything about this? I said, no, I don't know anything about this, unfortunately. I have not come in contact with whoever you're talking about or had this sort of experience, so I can't report on it. She says, okay. And I asked her what she planned to do about it, and she said, well, I'm going to ban him. And I asked her the next day, hey, so how'd it go? And she said, Fortnite won't allow me to ban this person. And I said, excuse me, don't you have the proof? Don't you have all of the messages you've gathered? Don't you have all of the... She says, yeah, he knows. He knows about this. He won't let me ban him because he's friends with this person. And I'm like, are you... what are you gonna do? She's like, I'm gonna do it anyway, and if he gets rid of me, he gets rid of me. And I don't know exactly what happened after that interaction. I don't believe the player was banned. I believe Zabi stepped down at the end of the season because of it. Zabi and I were actually not on super good terms at the end of the seasons for some random personal stuff that happened at the end, but I never, ever felt like she did the wrong thing there. I have the utmost respect for all that she was trying to do for UGC and powerless to do because Fortnite didn't want any changes to happen. In the end, she helped kill UGC by becoming an admin at RGL. I know that they were intentionally trying to keep the admins in between to keep that kind of, consistency between the leagues, at least at the beginning.
Right, and just to like help the transition kind of from the leagues.
Yeah. But that's what ended up happening. It was weird as all hell.
Sounds like she was a real pioneer in the community, though.
She was trying to be. She just didn't have any ability to, and God, people hated her by the end. But you try to make the decisions for, 400 people.
Right. Okay. That's a lot to take in. Wow. Thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. Surprised no one knows about this. I feel like I'm the only person that knows half this stuff for some reason.
Hey, maybe not anymore.
Maybe not anymore. How many viewers are you getting, BlizzTag?
I don't know. I think like 30 to 50 usually.
Ooh. Some people are going to learn some spicy stuff from me.
Yeah, maybe they'll like talk about it, people learn about it, like maybe not from the video directly, but just from friends to friends.
Yeah, let's hope some people learn about all that happened. Basically, the player that she was trying to ban also, I won't give details on who they are because, it would be pretty easy to figure it out.
Right.
But what I will say is they had been in the league since basically the very beginning, and this behavior had been happening since the very beginning. So Fortnite had known about this for years before Zabi tried to do anything about it.
So he was complicit in it, yeah?
Yep. Entirely knowingly complicit.
Okay. So that's a lot about UGC in the past.
Oh yeah.
What do you
the
think?
Olden days.
What do you think about UGC in the present? Like,
hell, I don't know
about
what's
General
going on
Nick's
over there.
attempts?
All I know about what's going on there currently is that one of my mentees' teams had a scrim scheduled against a UGC team, and I said, "Don't do it. It's gonna be god awful," and they did it, and it was god awful. That's all
I'm
I
a
know.
mind reader. Okay. So, what was the player culture like back then? Did it feel like there was like a more or less of a sense of a community back then? Like, what was it sort of like?
So UGC as a community was definitely like a smaller community, so in that regard it was already tighter knit just because it was smaller, and it was terrible. Like, I was told by my mentor, who, if you can recall from the earlier part of this conversation, was toxic and definitely a sociopath, and he was telling me not to talk with anyone because none of them were worth talking to.
Well,
of course, that was his opinion, I guess, but his teammates back in the day were also kind of my mentors, and some of them are still my friends to this day. Vipa, Perception, love these guys. They're wonderful. Vipa says it could be Vipa or Vipa. Don't at me. Anyway. They were wonderful. They were genuine, fun people. I was kind of friends with Boar and his brother, Villain, or Dingus, or Dongus, or whatever he goes by.
I think Dongus.
They were nice. Aside from that, I didn't really talk much to the higher up players, though, because I was told, stay away, they're toxic.
Right.
And it turns out they were toxic.
No
but
way.
That's just kind of like esports communities overall. I don't know what happens, but you get to a certain point and people's egos are just like, they can't take a loss. They will blame other people. They'll be disrespectful and say this person's trash. They aren't worth anything. You don't have to worry about this player. It's like they don't have a spy. That sort of attitude.
Right.
And there's some healthy level of trash talk where you're like, don't worry about this player. They're not as good as everyone says. Just go into the game and win it. Like, there's that. And then there's the, like, going out of your way to harass a person because you think that they're bad. And that happened a lot in the UGC era. Komori, of course, received a ton of garbage from people. A lot of people would constantly just be harassing Komori, and she would respond by being disrespectful and crappy back. And it was unhealthy, and nothing about what was going on was fine. It led to a very bad interactions between the admins and the players. Just players interacting with each other sucked. Can't imagine how many times I was called terrible things in the middle of matches. Like, these days, you can't use the funny word even in a scrim, right? Like,
right.
then, people were naming their team the N-word.
Wow.
You know, like, and they ready up F4, team's name, N-word. You're like, oh, great, I know what we're getting into.
Yeah, and even these days, like, for all the PR that UGC tries to do, there's still some, like, fairly racist stuff that you can see as just, like, team names, team profile pictures, and it's kind of interesting to see, and that's definitely something you'd say RGL has improved on, yeah? Compared to
Yes.
UGC? Okay.
Yeah, I don't feel totally freaking embarrassed to bring up anything from my community now.
So, is there anything you kind of miss looking back at the UGC days, or things that you think UGC did better than RGL? I feel like it's... Okay, yeah. I feel like it's just, like, a lot easier to see, like, you know, things that RGL does better, but... Yeah, I still appreciate hearing that regardless. It's just interesting to see what people think.
If you guys had the experiences that I had in UGC, any stupid things that the admins do now, it's harmless stupid, right? Like, it's perfectly harmless stupid. Back then, harmful stupid. Much different.
So, do you feel like you would trust the RGL admins, even with, like, what happened with the UGC admins? Like, or is that sort of kind of tainted your goodwill as a whole towards them?
So most of the RGL admins I know from either playing against them, being teammates with them, or something. Like, I know them. I generally think they're good people for the most part. There have been some that I've been like, this is a very questionable admin choice. Why the hell did you choose this person? And they've gotten rid of those people.
That's nice.
They definitely have the... You know when a bunch of people get together and they're like, we want to be very good, we want to be genuine goodwill, and then they don't do anything to death, right? Like, they just sit around and they're like, we want to be really good about this, so we're going to unban this person, even though they've cheated, said the N-word, were toxic to all of their teammates, harassed players, and doxed a person, and then sent a bomb threat. But, you know, we may think there may be some good in this person. We don't want to, like, permaban them. Like, that's the thing that I get on RGL now for. It's like, their permabans are not permanent.
Right.
There's always a probation. There's always a probation. They're always able to get unbanned. And it's stupid, because a lot of the people that they're getting unbanned get banned again within a week. Like, these players are just bad. I'm sorry. So I like how they're not very, like, black and white, just immediate, you get permanently banned, there's no appeal or anything. But they also give so many appeals to people that are just not worth it.
Right. So, do you think maybe they're just trying a bit too hard to, like, play the PR game compared to making meaningful change?
Sometimes, yeah, like, I guess that's the best way of putting it, is sometimes they just really try to not be bad to the point where they don't do good.
Right, like, out of fear. And it's just, like, that's not necessarily the best way to go about things, I would think. Yeah,
so, personally, I don't know how to run things. I've never been an admin. I've been a leader on teams a billion times over, but it's different. Right. Especially when you're having to deal with the people that you don't want to deal with. Being a leader means you don't have to deal with those people. Being an admin means you do have to deal with those people and be nice. But I feel like there should be various times where they should just put their foot down and say, no, you're... My guy, bomb threats are not okay. Like, it gets to the point where the only thing you can be permanently banned... There are two things you can be permanently banned for in RGL. And these two things are cheating multiple times or pedophilia. Like, that's it. Everything else, you're free. You can get appeals, you can come back in a year, you can come back next season. Like, the hell? It's like, the only things we care about, like, don't have sex with children. Everything else we're fine with. Which is the 4chan rule, in case anyone's not aware. Like, the only thing that's banned on 4chan is child porn, and everything else goes.
This is gonna get my channel cancelled.
I'm sorry.
It's okay, it has to be said. This is why I have it on flash drives as well.
But yeah, like, you ever think about that and go, man, RGL moderation is just one step above 4chan moderation at times. Yeah. Of course, there have been some players that have actually gotten, like, banned, and they don't come back because they're toxic and stuff. But there's, like, I talked to Will Maddock while he was head admin, and he's like, sorry, I'm in the middle of something. This person is caught coming back on an alt again, and I'm like, is it this guy? And he's like, how the hell did you know? I'm like, it's the same guy that's been doing this for like the last 7 years on UGC. It's the same dude.
So do you think maybe there are, like, I don't know, just like a few lessons that RGL could have, like, learned from UGC that they just sort of haven't out of fear in that sense?
I feel like because RGL is trying to
not be UGC?
Both sides of the community, protect the toxic, sandbaggy, disrespectful, awful people, and also the nice, good-hearted people that are trying to climb and learn how to play the game better. Like, they've done the best that they could, and I think they're doing a legitimately good balance. I personally wouldn't allow some of the people that they've allowed back, but let's be honest, some of the top part of the community is just like that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And if you ban every person that's that sort of disrespectful, toxic, whatever, then you're going to lose the top part of your community, and you may have a really good, strong, friendly community, but you won't have, like, the actual best players. Does that make me feel good saying? No, I'd rather we just have fun. But but they did a good job with what they were aiming to do, which is, like, they don't entirely destroy the top end of the community that's awful, and they don't make it so that the newer players feel like they can't get into the community because it's toxic garbage.
Right, and it's like they're definitely trying, and that's a step in the right direction from UGC, yeah?
Yeah.
Rather than being complicit in it.
I mean, Zabi tried really hard, right. But she did everything alone. This has a committee at least, and sometimes these committees make the stupidest choices, but I live with it. I'm fine with people making bad choices at the head as long as they try to correct themselves and get better.
Do you think RGL works enough with the community, or like takes in it, does enough in the way of community initiatives?
Somewhat. I feel like they could absolutely stand to gain for more. So, like, right now they just do like end of season polls, and they're like, "What do you like? Did you have good interactions with your admins? Was that good?" And I usually add a lot of stuff in the extra comments box. A lot of players don't. And then they complain about things. Or sometimes they'll add just a silly comment that is a waste for everyone, like #free whatever player they didn't want banned.
Right.
I feel like they are working with the community pretty well. I do think they make some poor decisions. I also think that the poor decisions they make can't rally a huge movement against, because the only people that would know are the people from the teams involved, yeah?
Right.
Like, for example, back in season... I don't remember what season it was. It was a while ago. There was a season in which my team won main undefeated. That is actually not the case. What happened was, in our very last match, Grand Finals, the team that we played against had a scout that was hacking, and he was caught hacking. He was caught hacking in the match, he was caught hacking in UGC, he was caught hacking in RGL. It was 100% he was banned. He hacked in Grand Finals, and they won the match, so they won the Grand Finals, and obviously it came out that he was hacking, so my team was like, okay, so the match is going to get overturned. And head admin at the time said, yep, the match is going to get overturned. And I'm like, sweet. And so I wait, and I see what happens to the match, and it was, we got second place, they didn't get first place. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, you said we lost it, and also they lost it, and we get second place, and no one gets first. And they're like, yeah, well, we looked at the logs of that match, and, like, their scout, I mean, he didn't really have that much of an impact. Or, like, that scout had 40 more kills than the next highest person, you understand? And they're like, yeah, but your team wasn't doing so well in spite of it. You know, it's really hard to push on product when you're constantly losing a flank 3v1, right? Like,
right.
my engineer, soldier, and scout were all dying to their scout, and this... They're like, yeah, well, what can you do? And I'm like, you can make it so that if someone's hacking in grand finals, the win goes to the other team, like UGC did, like everyone does. Like, the hell?
Yeah, so that would be Season 7 of Highlander in RGL.
Season 7, I don't remember. Things bleed together when it's been so long. But yeah, that's what happened. And I'm like, what the hell? This is stupid. This is so incredibly stupid.
Okay.
And eventually, like 2-3 seasons later, when Wilmatic became head admin, it was something that he changed. He gave us that win back 2 seasons later.
Retroactive dub. Did you get a medal for it?
We did, but
Whoa.
Understand, this was the state of my team at the end of that season. At the end of that season, my team was willing to stick together and move up to Advanced if we won. But because of how Main and Advanced were set up in those days, only the team that got first place was guaranteed move up. We didn't get first place. We were not guaranteed move up. The other team was, even though their scout was hacking. So my team, my sniper left. And my soldier left. And because my sniper and soldier left, my team separated. They didn't trust that our team would stick together without our sniper because he was incredibly good, and our soldier who was really good at initiative. Like, our team fell apart because of the players that left because we lost that.
Right.
RGL killed my team.
And
we would have stayed together for another season if that were...
Who was...
Of course, we ended up rebuilding and going into Advanced anyway, but we lost a lot of my players that I liked to play with. It was horrible.
Right. And, okay. So... Who was the head admin behind that decision? Like, I want to get your perspective on just, like, the various different RGL Highlander head admin.
Michael Lele was the admin at the time. I talked with Inquisition, who was my division admin, and then talked with Michael Lele. Michael Lele said it was not his decision alone, but the admin committee decision on it. I don't know if that was the case, but he said that is what they decided to do based on past decisions. It had happened before, and that's what they did. And I told him I thought it was stupid, and he told me he respected it, and that's as far as it went. Honestly, I have no qualms with Michael Lele. I thought he did a pretty good job as a head admin. I just thought that decision was stupid as hell.
Right.
Like, what? No one got first place? The match never happened. Can we replay it without their scout? No? Okay. What?
So, what do you think of, like, just the Highlander head admins so far, then just, like, the recent transition from Wilmatic to Constantly? If you could give me, like, a brief rundown of your sentiments towards that.
So, to be perfectly honest, because of how I run my teams and how... Like, generally, I don't come in contact with the admins because I know what I'm doing. I've been around for so long, I know how my teams are supposed to be built. When I need help in a match for one reason or another, it's usually just like the other team wants to ring a player that I don't think they should be allowed, and I get an admin to weigh in on it. That's it.
Right.
It's not ever a... I don't have to do those big talks with admins about stuff except for that match. So... When it comes to head adminship, I don't feel like, anyone has done a particularly horrible job.
Like, just, like, from a more, like, distance perspective, though, right? You spend, like, a lot of time mentoring, caring about the community. Like, what do you think the state of the RGL scene and, like, the health of Highlander was under the various admins? Do you think it was, like, fairly consistent? Do you think any of them did a particularly good or poor job at fostering the health of the scene?
So, personally, I feel like I really liked Wilmatic as a head admin. Wilmatic, I will say, more than anything, is not a yes man. He's not a person that's just like, Segafu wants this, so I'm doing it. He looks at the community, he thinks about how he wants to do things, and he does it. He doesn't make decisions that other people want him to make. He makes decisions that he thinks are good, and if he has his admin say, no, you're dumb, then he'll back off. But it was nice having a person with their own opinions on things. It reminded me of how Zabi tried to tackle the community herself. I don't think there should be one person with absolute power making all the decisions for anything, and that's not what Will was. But some people seem to think that Will didn't make good decisions. I don't get it. Because I talked with him a lot when he was head admin because we're friends, and he said, well, I wanted to try this thing. I thought it would work out really well, but they didn't let me do it. I'm like, oh, okay. And that was the story every single time. It's just like, well, I thought this would be helpful. They didn't let me do it.
So
I thought this was helpful. They didn't let me do it. And I talked with him about that. And I'm like, this is kind of ridiculous. What are they allowing you to do? He's like, well, they're allowing me to do the things that they want to do.
So he was like a bit more of like a token admin, kind of like under RGL, like they didn't really allow him to do what he thought would really be best.
Yeah, they wanted him to be effectively the lead without making his own decisions, which was silly. I think that when you put someone in charge, they're going to make decisions, and if you don't like the decisions they make, then throw them out. But
right. Like, don't let them
if
take
you
the
want
blame.
A person to be the admin, let them be the admin.
Right, like don't make them take the blame for your your decisions, kind of. Let them make their own. Okay.
So, also, I do know that when admin Willmatic stepped down, it wasn't exactly his decision to do so. It was their decision. And they sent him a list of things that they thought he didn't do. And those were all the things he'd been trying throughout the season. He's been telling me, I wanted to work on this, so I was going to do this, and they told me no. Those were the things that they said he didn't work on. He's like, well, I was trying to work on it, you just didn't frickin' let me do anything about it.
So you think RGL and the TF2 community have just kind of given Willmatic a bit of a raw deal, so to speak?
Yes.
Sorry to hear that.
Dumb.
Very interesting, though. Very interesting to hear, for sure. I'm glad that you were able to just, give this perspective.
Yeah, you can talk with Will I'm sure he'd be up for it if you want to hear his perspective on everything, but it's not like he wasn't doing anything. I saw the things that he was trying to do. He showed me what he was trying to do. I'm like, oh, that sounds neat. And also, I am the sort of person that, I am perfectly happy with failures. If the admins are like, you know what? I think it would be great if we just tried to unban the Diamondback for a season. And then you just see, medic deaths go up a billionfold because spies are able to just crit kill the med. If they come out and they're like, okay, that wasn't, the best idea we'd had, but, we did try it, I'd be like, hell yeah! Trying things! The game is becoming stale, let's just try some nonsense, woo!
So, do you think RGL has just kind of put Willmatic in a place where he's just kind of like a scapegoat for the community's frustrations at this point? Do you think that's a failure on RGL's part?
Yep.
That is definitely fair.
I don't know how much Will would want me to talk about this, but let's put it this way. A lot of the things that people complain about, such as Advanced in general being either a limbo where the same teams are in it, or having too many teams in it and needing to push up a higher division like Challenger was for a bit. Those sorts of problems. I won't say what the solutions were or anything, but I will say Willmatic directly did try to make decisions on them that were thrown out.
Wow.
And then those were the reasons why he was thrown away, is because they said he didn't do anything about it.
Wow, yeah, that's really interesting to hear. Honestly, I was kind of in the anti-Willmatic camp to start with as well, but I'm glad to just get a bit more of the other side of it from you, yeah.
Yeah, just talk with him. I'm sure he'd be up for it.
That'd be a good interview, I think, yeah.
But yeah, he didn't let things sit. They were making him sit. If that changes your opinion on anything going on, then you'll understand that things are a lot more complicated than they seem.
Yeah, a lot more nuance to it. Yeah, definitely. So what do you think that means for the future of RGL, constantly taking over as HL head admin? What do you think the future kind of is for RGL and the Highlander community?
So my opinion of what is going to happen is they're going to put an admin in who's initially going to be like, I got this, I'll be better than the previous guy, and then they're going to start trying to make changes. They're going to be shot down by the invite council and the other admins, and they're not going to make any changes, and then they're going to be thrown out.
And you think
And that's
that,
going to be the cycle. Unless they're a yes man that does whatever the committee decides, then they're just going to be the scapegoat.
and you think that like the invite council is plays a big part in this then?
Yeah, a lot of admins just bow to whatever the invite players want because they need to keep the top layer of the game more than they need to keep the bottom layer of the game, but that's not how I think of things.
So, where do you think we go from here? How does RGL solve this? How do people who want to make a change solve this? And how does the community as a whole solve this? What do we do to change it?
We embrace the low divs. I'm not joking. I generally think that the new ideas will come from the new people. I think that the toxic attitude, if it's not tolerated low, will not be tolerated high. I think that the more that we train newer players to be good leaders, we're going to lose those leadership problems with teams exploding halfway through the seasons.
Right. So you think rather than just like taking it on from like a top-down perspective, we need to go from like the bottom and work our way to the top and sort of just like systematically cleanse the sort of social standards we have right now as a community?
I think that if we started from the bottom and we embraced the new players and we taught them how to do things and they taught us how to do some nonsense that they came up with, which sometimes they got some silly, brilliant stuff, right? They're adorable.
Right.
Not condescending. Sometimes I have the most energy come from the new players because they're not all burnt out. They're not all like washed up. I've played this since UGC Season 3. I know the right way of playing the game. You get a lot of energy from the new people. You got a lot of talent from the new people. They are generally respectful. They don't hate the community yet. you know?
They still have something left to give, kind of, right?
Yeah. And it's nice being able to talk with players that legitimately want to play every week. It's in every single TF2 Discord that you walk into. You're ringing for a team. You go in. You're ringing for advanced team. You're like, man, I don't want to be here. And all of their players will say, same, I hate this game. Why are we doing this? You don't get that when you play newcomer. They're all like, hell yeah, I want to be here. We're going to do so well. Look at our Pyro. He's the best Pyro of all time, right? Like, right. I love it. It's just so good energy.
Okay. No, I definitely think you're on a good train of thought there. So, what is it like for the newer players right now in RGL? Like, what's the new player experience?
It's a lot different than mine, I'll say that much. Most players, they will still have the same way of coming to RGL, where they'll run into a competitive player in a pub and talk about it. Or they will find RGL on their own when looking to play more competitive stuff, because the Valve matchmaking is garbage and we know it. And they come into the community, they find the RGL Discord, and it has an instruction manual that a lot of people don't know how to read, but they eventually figure it out. And it tells them how to make a team, how to look for team, how to join Discords, how to interact with people, that sort of thing. I do feel like these younger players can absolutely benefit from some instructions on leadership, because the RGL Discord doesn't really go over that. My example being, I got this mentee who's making a team, and he's like, man, I get all these tryouts together and they just don't show up. I'm like, oh god, that sucks. I know that feeling. So how have you been setting up your tryouts? He's like, yeah. So they ask me for a tryout. Yeah, and yeah, so I ask them what class they're going to be, and they say Pyro. I'm like, okay, cool. And he's like, yeah. And then I mark it on the list, and then on Saturday at 8:30, I ping and say, I need a Pyro. And I say, excuse me, what? He's like, yeah, I just ping them, and then they don't show up. And I'm like, you understand they're trying out for other teams, right? He says, what do you mean? I'm like, usually you say, okay, so your tryout is going to be Saturday, 8:30 and 9:30. Are you good with that? And they say yes. And then you say, okay, I'll see you then. He said, oh. Like, so all of these poor tryouts were just thinking they were getting baited by this leader.
Wow.
Because no one explained to him that, like, you have to actually set up the tryout time to make sure they show up at tryout time. It's like, RGL, you got them so close to doing it correct, but that final step of, like, make sure your tryouts show up was never communicated to half these team leaders and newcomer.
So, how do you feel about, like, mentorship as a whole in the RGL community? Do you think that, like, are there, like, the current higher div people, like, are a good influence on the newer players? Do you think that there's sort of, like, enough of them doing that? Sort of just, like, stuff along those lines?
Yeah, so the RGL community has made mentorship a lot easier by having just the LFM channel, the looking for mentor.
Right.
You can post, I'm looking for mentees, or I'm looking for mentors, and then you get married. It's great. What I will say is the mentees that post in there, they often don't know what they're signing up for, and the mentors that post in there don't know either. Like, mentorship is such a loose concept that every mentor you get is so incredibly different. Like, everyone knows that if Banny is mentoring you, it means that sometimes live on his Twitch channel, he is going to be reviewing your demo. And then there are mentors like me who, like, I say, hello, I have this much experience. What is it that you want to work on? DM? Okay, so we can, on Saturday, get into a DM server. I can watch what you're doing as you fight against someone else. Or, you think you have troubles with this map, I can look over a demo for this map and give you a map review after and give you some advice on how you should be looking at things. Some players want a lot of advice in terms of, like, okay, I'm a spy, I need to know where I'm allowed to decloak from, what things I should be playing off of, what things I should be communicating to my team. As a demo, it's really, really hard as a main caller. And when you do a demo review, it doesn't teach main calling. When you do a map review, it doesn't teach main calling. You have to physically have a demo recorded with all the comms recorded to have a good, like, review of main calling.
Right. So, what do you think of just, like, older things, kind of like round table stuff like that we don't really see these days? Do you think that plays a part in it as well? Just, like, a lack of easily accessible kind of collaborative mentoring experience and things that kind of involve the community more?
So, when there was this Discord that I'm aware of, I don't remember exactly who owns it. It might be Flare, it might be
Inquisition, Flare, The Office, yeah.
Inquisition, yeah, that Discord.
Yeah,
and I hate it.
Yeah, I'm in there. It's not really collaborative, although it's not that active. Like,
so that Discord and that style of mentoring, I always really disliked because it has this air of, like, okay, you're going to class with one very intelligent professor speaking to all of his stupid classmates, you know, like, this attitude of, like, you have to join the specific Discord and go into the waiting for teacher channel to wait for someone to mosey along. I don't like that. My mentees, I don't want them to feel like they're lesser than me. I don't want to say that this works because it's amateur. You know, like, the advice I want to give to people is just, like, here's some things I've noticed about your gameplay. It may not be the same as how you play, and you may find that the things I tell you don't work as well as the things that you figure out on your own. You just asked for advice, and I gave advice. So, some teammates, or some teams that I've mentored have less confidence in their ability than that. And they will come in and be like, hey, we got no idea what we're doing. Can you tell me everything about how to make this work? And I'm like, okay, this is the way I do it. This is the way I've found success. This is the way I approach situations. These are the things I'm looking for to play off of.
Right.
I don't like saying, well, this is going to work in amateur because everyone's stupid. Right. That's a lot of what I hear is like, oh, you're in a low div, you can do this. This is going to be great. You're going to demolish them all because you're the only people that know, like, the good strategies.
And that doesn't necessarily, like, help them out in the long term, right? Like, it's just teaching them to do things that'll work for that specific context, right?
Yeah.
So, to get back to the question, kind of, though, what do you think of older, more collaborative things, like the round tables?
Oh, so,
you think there's a need for them?
I've never really mentored in that sort of space, and I don't know exactly how well they work because I was never using that, you know? Like, that was never the way I went about things, so I can't comment too much on that.
Do you think that would be like something that might be beneficial for like the community to like try and reach out again and to like collaborate on and explore going forward though? Do you think it could be something that could be beneficial?
It's certainly possible and helpful to some people. I wouldn't deny that.
Okay. So
it's just never the most collaborative mentoring I had was when I was being mentored by my old mentor in Perception and Vipa at the same time. And it was mostly just like watching them play and all watching how they play off of each other, rather than having just like a community roundtable.
Right. I don't know, like, me personally, I think there'd be a lot of benefit from just like more collaboration between mentors, just like people kind of working together on things, answering things together, and just providing like a wider perspective. I feel like that might be a lot more approachable and kind of like broadly helpful per se.
Yeah. I know that a lot of mentees are intimidated talking to players of higher divisions because I've heard that personally from my mentees. They're like, right. I'm sorry to reach out, I don't want to bug you. I'm like, I don't know what you think you're interrupting.
So, do you have any mentors like in the present day that you think are like worth shouting out, deserving of attention?
Matches is an extraordinary mentor.
Miss
She
Matches,
helps with Miss Matches. She helps with Scout Scout Medic Pyro. Who else mentors these days? I know back in the day, Grin and Flimlasky both mentored NGs, but neither of them really do that these days. My teammates, personally, I use as mentors. Basically, anytime I'm on a team with someone and one of my mentees is like, okay, so you're mentoring my demo man, but I'm a soldier and I want a soldier mentor. I'm like, okay, whoever my soldier is, you're getting a mentee. I've had a lot of my former teammates. Elite used to mentor Spies. He doesn't really do that anymore because now he's a League player. I'm sure he would be up for it, but Perception helps me a lot. He doesn't mentor anymore. He doesn't even play the game anymore. But yeah, I'm trying to think of who else mentors these days that's fun to shout out. I don't know a whole lot of mentors these days aside from the ones that I make into mentors around my teams.
That's fair.
I think Joey Lemon still mentors. He's a good person.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I trust his judgment on stuff. Yeah. Anyway.
Okay. So what are some of your experiences as a mentor? Like some of the more interesting ones?
Are we talking about that thing, BlizzTank?
Yeah, the things you brought up before.
We're talking about that. Okay. I had BlizzTank listen to the story beforehand to see if he was willing to put this in the interview here. So no one is going to believe half the mentoring experiences that I've had, but dear Lord. Let me start off by saying I give every mentee of mine just 3 things that they gotta do. They got 3 factors of remaining my mentee. Number 1 is emotional stability. They're allowed to have off days, they're allowed to vent to me about stuff, but mentor time is mentor time, which means if they're asking me to mentor, they are not talking about their emotional problems, their depression, their suicidal thoughts, that sort of thing. They can vent to me about that stuff after, as a friend, but not to me as a mentor, because that does not make sense. I'm not a therapist. Number 2, they must remain on the same class. If they're a demo mentee, and they say, I'm Pyro this week, they are not a demo mentee. They are a Pyro, or a Soldier, or a Scout. But the class hopping stuff I don't deal with, because the hell, I don't know how to play Spy. You don't ask me for Spy advice. And number 3, in order to be my mentee, they must talk to me. Low bar. Most of my mentees miss it. So many of my people are like, I wanted to be on this team, and they said I needed a mentor, so I got a mentor, and now I'm not going to talk to you. Like, that's not mentoring. That's far from it. Anyway, those are the 3 tiny little hurdles they must overcome if they must have me as a mentor. That's it. That's all I require. And yet, I have had some mentees. So, first team I ever mentored was a Iron Steel-ish team when I was in Silver. They ended up being a wreck in several different ways. Gist of what was going on there is they had a pyro, and this pyro was a person that liked spending a lot of time on 4chan poll. He liked being very controversial and disrespectful, and their engineer was the opposite. He was a teacher's pet and always wanted this pyro to get in trouble, and it was a pathetic situation, let me be honest. It came to a point where I just had to go, you guys, you are all being stupid. Chill. Leave the team or stay together if you can work it out. But the gist of it is, if you are in-game, you are friends and teammates and you have to act like it. You have to be ready to support each other. And if you're not like that, leave the team. It's just, let's get this done and over with. Their team ended up dying, no big surprise. And then I'm like, man, that sucked. That was a horrible experience. I'm going to take a break from mentoring. When I come back, I'll be fresh. I'll be happy. I'll be a good mentor, bring good people into this game. And my very next experience was as follows. I mentored a team in which the demo man, he was, he had some baggage, but that's okay. I am fine with people venting to me about their problems. I'm good for listening. They had a pyro who was transgender and very emotional about a lot of things happening in their life because they're a teenager, they're transgender, lots of things going on. I understand, girl. It's all good. They had a scout who was kind of an a-hole, to be perfectly honest. He was a jerk. He was from Brazil. He was very Catholic. It was a very odd situation for him. And then a bunch of other players on this team. All of them were young. They were all confused high schoolers that had no idea what was going on. I forgive them. So basically, the demo brings me on, and he's like, hey, can you mentor me? I want to learn some stuff about demo, feel like I can get better. I'm like, yeah, sure. He's like, okay. Can you do map reviews for my team and stuff and be kind of more of a team mentor now? We couldn't figure out someone to do that. I'm like, okay. Somehow, I start to realize in comms while I'm watching them play that their pyro is getting their transgender pyro is getting severely bullied by their scout main. And I'm like, man, cut it out. Stop being an a-hole. You really need to quit this. And he's like, yeah, sure. Okay. Doesn't quit it right away. I'm like, okay. What is this guy's deal? So I talked to the demo. And the demo's like, yeah, I don't know. He's getting on my nerves too. He's kind of being disrespectful towards me as well. I'm like, okay, what's the situation? He's like, well, I'm kind of dating this pyro. And I'm like, oh, well, that's sweet. He's like, yeah, well, I'm dating this pyro. My scout friend, he's from Brazil. He's Catholic. He doesn't really believe in this sort of stuff. I'm like, got it. Okay, I'll talk with him about that thing. So we have some bigotry going on, and I think that's the end of it. Well, demo main next day is like, hey, the demo mentoring session we were supposed to have. Can I cancel? I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. Are you all right? And he's like, yeah, well, my brother got pistol whipped yesterday, and he might lose his eye. I'm like, excuse me, what? He's like, yeah. And it's also coming close to the anniversary of my boyfriend's suicide because my boyfriend, he got disowned by his family when he came out as gay. And he killed himself. I'm like, oh, okay. Are you okay? You need to. Is there anything I can do for you? He's like, just be around to listen. That'd be nice. I'm like, okay, that's good. So, hang out with the rest of his team during that day or two or week. I think it was a week or so that he was kind of out. And their scout and pyro are still just going at it constantly. And I eventually just start talking to their scout. I'm like, dude, you need to quit it. And he's like, okay. Gotta admit something to you. I'm like, okay, what is it? And he's like, okay, so I think I really like this pyro. And I'm like, you do? You kind of look like you hate her. He's like, well, so I think I might be gay. because I like her, but she's transgender. So I don't know if that's okay. Because God doesn't like homosexuals. But if she is a girl, does that mean it's okay? I'm like, man, I don't freaking know. This is a really weird situation you're asking me of all people about. He's like, yeah, well, I'm starting to become kind of suicidal over it because I don't know if God likes me. I'm like, okay, I'm going to talk to one of my religious friends and maybe he can give some, like, religious counseling advice. I don't know. And so I did that and tried to calm him down. And I started talking to the Pyro, and the Pyro's like, I'm just so tired of being bullied for being transgender. I just need to be away from this team. I'm like, that makes sense. Please do. Please just get as far away from all these people as possible. It's just sinking in negativity. And then there's Spy. There's Spy, who had nothing to do with anything that's going on. Just posted pictures in the Discord of him making cut marks on his wrist. I'm like, Dwight, are you okay? I'm having a rough time. My parents don't understand me. I'm like, okay. Please, everybody just stop. Everyone quit this team. Go to therapy, please.
Only in TF2?
I have no idea. This is actually people I mentored. This is things that were happening. Okay. Anyway, I don't know where any of these players ended up, to be honest. I don't think any of them play anymore. But, like, that was an experience I had. So that's the point where I had to lay down the ground rules of, like, please, like, emotional stability. I am all for being a helpful person in your Demoman gameplay. If you have problems with tilting, I can help you with that. I can help you with your self-confidence at gameplay. I can't deal with whatever that was.
I don't blame you.
And so that's like 4 of their players were like kind of emotionally unstable, depressy, that sort of thing. A 5th one of their players came to me and they're like, hey, I'm like, okay, what is it? And they're like, yeah, so I think I might actually be transgender. I think I might actually be a woman. I'm like, oh, okay. So how'd you come to that realization? Do you feel like you're gonna go by new pronouns, new name? And she's like, yeah, I don't know, I've just been thinking about it. And I'm like, okay, have you talked to a therapist about it? She's like, yeah, so I go to this therapist every week because I've had some trauma in my life. I'm like, okay. You're the first person I've told about this. I'm like, excuse me, what? Why? You're going to a therapist every week, and I am the person you tell about this? And they're like, yep, you're nice and you're understanding. I'm like, yep, your therapist is nice and understanding and actually knows how to deal with these sorts of problems, right? Like, they can help you through this. I can call you she, right? Like, I don't contribute much here. And they're like, yeah, well, I didn't want to tell my therapist because my parents got me my therapist and I didn't want my parents to learn these things. I'm like, it's like actually illegal for your therapist to tell your parents about stuff unless you're actively suicidal, right? And she's like, no. Anyway, tell your therapist about it. She's like, I'll consider it. I'm like, oh, for the love of God, what's wrong with just this team in particular?
Cursed.
This team was just all sorts of... this is a thing that happened. I cannot believe it myself. When I look back on this, I'm like, why the hell was I still there? I mentored this team for like a month. This wasn't like a one-day thing and then I'm like, okay, I'm bowing out. This was a month. Jesus. Anyway.
Well,
Not a therapist yet. Might be, eventually, but not now.
The TF2 therapist.
I am the team counselor, team mom,
okay.
Team everything but mentor, it turns out.
So, do you think just like all of this mentoring experience has sort of like shaped your perspective like on RGL, UGC, just like the game as a whole and what might need to change?
Oh yeah, so mentoring gives you a great perspective on the bottom of the community, on the newcomers and what they know and what they don't know, what sort of habits they're learning from the players they interact with and stuff. So personally, I always had some pretty strict rules from my leadership about what behaviors I would allow fly and what I wouldn't. So when it came to leading a team, the rules that I had for my teammates are very, very, they're very low bars to go over, right? So just, you're not allowed to be openly toxic with the other team. You don't send toxic messages to them. No N-words, no bigotry, hate speech, the terms and conditions of most websites, right? Like, wouldn't allow that. Other things I wouldn't allow. If I say something is done, we're not talking about it, we wait until the end. If we're in the middle of comms, something happens, people are mad about it, and I say shut up, that's it. That conversation ends, we bring it up later when the comms are clear, and we can talk about things after. Other things, I do not allow ringers that are excessively above our division to play for us. I would never ring an invite player when I was in I was mixing like UGC and RGL stuff. I was about to say silver. When I'm in main and I get an invite player, I don't let them play invite sniper in main, right? Like, that's not cool. So I don't do that. Other things were, if a team was excessively late constantly, we would stop scrimming that team. We would blacklist teams that were excessively late, excessively sandbaggy, excessively toxic. So I bring that to mentoring. When they're setting up scrims and stuff, if I watch their scrims and I see that the other team has rung 4 advanced players and they're a newcomer, and the team is being openly toxic, I'm like, don't scrim this team anymore. And they're like, well, they're one of our scrim partners. And I say, I don't care. Do you feel like you got anything from that? No. Well, you don't scrim that team anymore. It's better that way. I like teaching the newcomers that lesson, that it is perfectly okay to stop playing against players that are not worth it or disrespectful. You don't have to be in the toxic part of the community. You can avoid it the entire time and still have a good time playing. When it comes to picking up players, I warn them when I say a player has an excessive ego. I warn them when I see that a player is only willing to show up for half of a half and then they bail. They're like, that player was pretty good. I'm like, no, they left. That's not good. When a player makes a lot of excuses for themselves on why they won't do things your way, like, that's something I tell people to kick away, get rid of. And teaching those lessons early to teams, they end up being really, really stable teams. Like, you could get some really stable advanced teams from all these really stable amateur players. They will eventually make their way up there if they just keep good habits. They are friendly to the people that they meet. They don't go out of their way to be toxic. They pick up only players that are going to be worth it. And another lesson I teach them is it's perfectly okay to let a team die. If a team is being dysfunctional, if no one is ever happy, there's always large arguments at the ends of every scrim. No one wants to work with each other. That is not a team worth saving. That's a team worth letting die and going off on your own and finding newer players, because sometimes you just need some new energy. And if you're able to tell people that it's going to be okay, no matter what decisions they make, as long as they make ones that are, feel positive in their mind, they're going to end up in a good place in the community.
That's pretty good
advice.
So,
I like going to amateur newcomer and finding teams that are working on stuff, they have a lot of energy, and just helping them with both their interpersonal issues of, like, our medic just doesn't talk well with us, they just clam up every time we try to give him criticism and stuff. If I could just go in there and be like, hey guys, it's okay. We don't hate you, medic. We want to hear your perspective, and we want you to give your perspective to other people and work it out from both sides. And to help a team before they get to that point of, like, fiery explosion via no one listening to each other, and just being like, the criticism we give is never personal. It's just like, hey, we think you need to work on this, and we also think you need to work on that. I like that. I like being able to see the newer players learn and adapt as they play against harder and harder teams. So, I don't know. I like the lower divisions because it gives me a lot of perspective and a lot of hope for the community because you run into the people that you expect to find there.
Right.
The ones that don't really know what's going on, they don't know the best way of expressing themselves, they don't know the best way of approaching new situations, and you can give them the advice and tell them it's all okay to talk about anything with your team and give them that sort of team trust. Say, like, I promise you your players think that you're a good player. Everyone's just awkward talking about this stuff, and they end up just being, like, really chill with everyone.
Right.
It's great. It's a wonderful feeling to say, like, I was able to help these people realize that no one was actually terrible, it was all misunderstanding.
So, have you ever considered, like, applying to RGL and just, like, sort of imparting this perspective on them? Or do you think it's just, like, a fundamental issue with RGL, like, just kind of going along with, like, how they treat their head admins and what they do there? Like, do you think it's possible to make genuine change from within RGL in that regard?
There have been a couple of reasons why I never became an admin. I've always considered it. I've always wanted to be a newcomer amateur admin, because I feel like a lot of people, first of all, don't interact with those players much, and when they're tasked with interacting with them, they get like, oh my god, this player doesn't know what an LFT post is.
Right.
Jesus.
And it seems like,
and, you know, like I'm fine with teaching the little things. It's okay. I never get like, oh dear god, this person's hopeless. But the reasons why I haven't become an RGL admin, one is that I'm trying to get into medical school and have been accepted now, so I'm going to be in med school and it's going to be busy. But I've always been pretty busy. I worked in a hospital, I worked in a laboratory, I didn't have flexible hours with this. I've also felt like my perspective, while it may be beneficial for some people to have, I don't think that the community as a whole really wants it, I guess. I'm perfectly fine helping outside of the bureaucracy, right? Like, right. I am fine with people coming to me and me solving their problems without ever having to go to the admins. I am perfectly fine helping them with those sorts of problems and not having the RGL attached to my name.
Okay.
I don't need it, so I don't do it. I do think that they can find the help that they need in RGL without coming to me. And I just think there should be multiple outlets, right? Like,
right.
Come to me if you don't want RGL to solve your problems for whatever reason. I know a lot of people, I have a strong community, a lot of people are friends with me. We can solve some things for you. If it's the advice that you need, if it's the team building strategies, if it's the map reviews, demo reviews, that's all stuff you don't need RGL for. You can always seek me out instead. But if you don't want to come to me because you don't like my opinions, you don't like my perspective, you generally don't like me as a person, that's fine. You have all of RGL to go to.
So you seem to have a lot of...
Tying myself to it is kind of making it less helpful rather than more, yeah?
No, I definitely get that, yeah. So, you have a lot to say about, like, team leadership, right? What do you think the main thing that most teams and leaders get wrong is?
The biggest thing that I see a lot of team leaders do wrong consistently, and I'm talking about these teams that build every season and always die every season, those are the people that are willing to pick up people for just their skill, and not anything personality-wise. Personalities need to be able to mesh. If you have people that don't like each other on a team, it's going to go poorly. It's also, if you make exceptions for players on your team, I always came to the conclusion that my players are playing a very old game. And if they say, man, my girlfriend wants to go out for dinner tonight, I'm like, sweet, go out for dinner, have a nice time. I'm not going to guilt you into playing or anything like that. However, if you miss the weekend scrims, you are not playing the match. And if they're cool with that, then that's fine. That's how I lead my teams. It's very simple. Real life comes first. Any decision that I want to make, I'm going to be open about, and my teammates are allowed to tell me I'm an idiot. I get the final say, authority on every player that joins the team. Just because 8 people say, man, I want this person. If I say, then no. And that's the agreement we have. I treat my players like they aren't idiots, and I treat them like they have lives. In return, what they're giving up is I get the final say on things, and the fun part is I get the ability to mute and throw them in between channels and stuff. Woo! I don't use that power. Basically, I give myself the ultimate power and I don't use it very much.
Right. So,
and that proves to me, or that proves to my teammates that they can trust that I'm not going to do anything stupid and ridiculous. If they know I have absolute authority and I don't frickin' use it for anything, then they trust me 100%. If I make a decision, they're like, yeah, it's probably an okay one because I told everyone about it. I listened to criticism about it. I adjusted how I approached the situation because of what people said to me. And altogether, it feels like a group decision even though I had final say. And that's how you lead well, is you give everyone every reason to respect you. And every reason that they feel like they can trash talk you to your face. You don't go nuts with it. If someone says I am a stupid woman, I'm like, hell yeah, I am, and here you are leading or following me anyway. Which one of us is the stupid one now, huh?
So you think it's important to just be like super upfront and like kind of vocal about just like concerns and kind of just like work together as a team to like resolve them?
Yeah, it is usually like this. Like, I want to add a player to my team, and my players are like, I don't know, that medic had troubles with popping, not dropping, or this medic had issues with surfing. I'm like, I can see that. I understand what you're coming from. Do you think that this is issues that this person can resolve with mentorship or team criticism? And they're like, well, they took criticism pretty well. I'm like, okay. Do you think this is a criticism that they can listen to, improve, and then work on and eventually not have the issues anymore? If they say yes, then that person's accepted to my team. If they say no, then it's still my final decision if I want them or not. But usually that's how things would go, is it would be a discussion of like, I think that this person is reasonable. I think that we should scrim this team. And if someone says I'm not really sure on that because I don't feel like this went well or whatever, then they would tell me.
Okay.
But I also would like treat them as if they have lives, and that I'd never make them feel guilty about not taking the team first. There were several decisions where I'm like, hey guys, you want to do this? And they're like, I literally have no opinion on this. I'm like, perfect, it's my decision. Like, my teammates will sometimes say like, I really don't freaking care. Like, Kat, you don't have to include me on this. I'm like, okay. But I did. I gave them the options. I always made them feel like nothing was happening without their, you know, it wasn't ever a team that was led by one person making whatever decisions and then they'd drop out if they felt like things were going too stupidly. I always made decisions with other people. And another thing is, I know the toxic people, and I wouldn't invite them. Woo!
Winning.
I win! Yeah, I've had some players on my team that have been on the questionable line. That much I don't disagree with. I've had some players that I've looked back on, I'm like, man, I really don't think they should have been on my team ever, but I don't know. I found it plenty easy to discuss with everybody about everything.
Whereas, like, if you're not upfront or, like, vocal about stuff, it's like, you'll just have, like, a lot of tensions on the side, right? Like, you'll have people kind of, like, just focusing on themselves rather than the good of the team, right? Like, you'll have conflict.
Oh, yeah. Like, have you ever been on a team where at the end of a match, a player will just send you a message and they're like, wow, our medic was throwing.
Yeah.
And they only tell you. And they don't tell the leader. And then you realize, like, okay, there's probably 8 of these conversations happening on our team between a couple of players that are only telling each other their opinions and not overall. I don't deal with that. I tell people, if you think there's a problem with somebody, you can tell me directly. And I will help deal with that situation to the best of my ability. And if the other person doesn't want to deal, then whichever one is not being reasonable and not trying to come to the conversation at all is gone.
Do you think there's a lesson to be learned in that for the community as a whole? Like, maybe it'd be like a healthier approach to sort of take, with like RGL community interactions and vice versa, maybe with like how people perceive and react and treat the RGL staff, for instance, and other community members?
I don't know if there's a way of doing this publicly, because like when you talk about RGL decisions being dealt with in this manner, you're going to come across some really weird.
Right.
So, for example, let's say there's a player and they get banned because they were being disrespectful, depending on how you feel about it, right? Like, some people think it was disrespectful, some people think it was just all in the regular allowed trash talk. And then the RGL says, yeah, we're considering banning this person. And the community just goes outrage mode, where they're like, holy hell, why are you unbanning this guy? And some of them are like, I've had worse things said to me in a match a year and a half ago. This person should absolutely be unbanned. So those sorts of decisions, you'll never make the headway you want, because everyone that's weighing in on it are not people that are a part of your team, yeah?
Yeah.
It's opening it up to the wider community. It's too many opinions you get at that point.
How about from just like a team-to-team level, like just like more people being upfront and just like talking about their conflicts and issues with each other, like with other teams, with players, rather than just like kind of talking about it but behind their backs more so, like maybe for people just to be more upfront about their concerns as a community as a whole?
I absolutely believe that would be helpful if people were able to just say things to each other's faces. And I don't mean going to a person and harassing them because you hate them.
Right.
But I have a policy of anything that I say behind a person's back, I am willing to say to their face. I am 100% happy to say the things that I've said about certain players to their faces instead of behind closed doors in our private discords or whatever. I actually had conflict with a team leader a while back. So this was when I was in Maine, and we were doing practice for our playoffs against IM and advanced teams, because when you're in playoffs, like, your options are going up a div or down a div, right?
Right.
So we scrimmed against one of the top IM teams that was trying to get first place IM when we were going for top of Maine. And their team, they dropped our medic from a sniper shot from hiding behind the house in Swiftwater, you know, that thing? Like, you don't clear the house in Swiftwater, sniper snipes your medic as they move up to upper. And I don't remember exactly what they said, but they all spammed a toxic bind the moment our medic dropped. And I told our team, no one say a word. At the end of this, we're just done.
Okay.
And we absolutely, like, they killed our medic there. The rest of the scrim, we rolled them. We outright rolled them. I think we did the 2 halves of Swiftwater. I don't remember if we did the 2 halves or just the 1. But after we rolled them, we just quit. And we're like, look, we thought that this would be practice. We are absolutely willing to scrim against lower teams and higher teams and get rolled or roll. But if you're going to be toxic, then it's not fun anymore. Like, it's just, there's no point to this. We rolled you and you were toxic, so it wasn't even fun.
So, do you
and
think...
I said that to their leader, and they said, like, Lamau or whatever back. And then what I did is I told the other team leaders that were continuing to play in Maine, hey, heads up, we scrimmed against this IM team. They weren't worth your time. And we blacklisted them. And then the next interaction I had with that person was extraordinarily favorable, in which they apologized about everything, probably because they couldn't find any scrims.
Reformed.
And I've never had an issue with this person again. Do they hate me? Possibly. I don't know. But I will say that if I go to a person and I say, like, I don't like what you did, and I don't intend to give you the benefit of playing my team anymore, if they think that's hilarious and they don't want to scrim my team anyway because I'm stupid, then sure. We've had that interaction, and you know what? They don't have to scrim me anymore. That's good for them if that's not what they wanted. And I don't have to scrim anymore, so that's a win-win. If people are more willing to just be like, look, man, your team, they're idiots, and I think it's not worth it. congratulations! Both teams have gotten out of the interaction that they didn't want anymore.
Right. So do you think people just like being afraid of conflict or just like not being vocal upfront about these things is maybe like why some teams end up getting toxic players and like why toxic players end up kind of just like being present in the community still going forward? Do you think it's maybe something that ends up dividing the community a bit due to people just like resorting to grudges rather than resolution?
I think people should be less afraid of conflict, even if it's like the bad kind, even if it's the sort they'll end up with some harassing messages, because you could always block them. I think that people should be upfront and be like, I don't tolerate this. Especially team leads. Team leads are the ones that, as a team leader, I don't think you have a whole lot of more responsibilities over your team, but one of the responsibilities you have is no one is allowed to bully any of your players. As soon as they're one of your players, if someone is being disrespectful, you have to go after them and be like, you cannot do that, you cannot say that, or I will not play against your team anymore. That is one of the few protections that a team leader must be willing to provide. Like, bare minimum is, if you're, for example, if I, for example, had a player that used to date a player on the opposite team, and it didn't end so well, that one of the few things I'll do is say, hey, are you okay in this scrim? Do you want me to find a sub or not scrim this team? And they can make decisions on that. That's not what everyone has to do. Some people just say, well, this is your ex's team, put up with it. Sure, you could lead that way, but like, I feel like you should be at least a little respectful.
I agree.
But if people were willing to be upfront about these things, then you can just go to the other team and be like, hey, so love scrimming you guys, you're wonderful. Your scout, my engineer, can't have that interaction. So like, I'm not scrimming you anymore. Sorry about that. Whatever. It's good to get these things out of the way. It's good to have less awkwardness behind closed doors and more awkwardness up front, so you can have less awkwardness in total. Yeah.
Right. And do you think that's something that ends up influencing, like, in defining the top of the game, for instance? Like, the invite? I
don't know what invite's like, to be honest. There's so much toxicity everywhere up there, and I don't talk to a lot of the people because of it.
Okay.
I don't know if it's an issue of, like, not coming forward and being like, hey, I hate you. You know? Like, that's...
Yeah.
There is something to be said about, like, while I'm not afraid to say things to people, I also don't go out of my way to say things to people that isn't necessary. There are players I really hate in Invite right now. A lot. I don't just send them a message being like, hey, no, you don't really know me, we don't really talk or anything. I just want to let you know that, like, you are just a garbage human being. Like, you don't need that. That's unnecessary. What you do need is the willingness to, if that person seeks you out for whatever reason and just says, good game, nice drop, LMAO, you could say, yeah, I don't have any interest in speaking to you. Goodbye now. And just blocking. Like.
So, have you ever considered just, like, doing, like, a leadership guide yourself, maybe?
I give leadership guides to the mentees that I am teaching how to lead. I haven't posted a leadership guide or anything. I don't put myself out there that much in the community for that sort of thing. But it's not something I would be, like, totally unwilling to do.
Yeah,
I've written stupid guides about other things before, so.
Do you think maybe that would just, like, help in the community? Or, like, maybe if, like, multiple people, like, came together and kind of collaborated to work on something like that, if RGL won't, do you think that would definitely be something that could help out the community?
I think it could. I don't know how much people go out of their way to read those sorts of things, so.
That's definitely fair.
I'm the sort of person that, for the most part, just seeks out advice when it's been asked and doesn't give advice before.
Right. Okay.
Wouldn't be opposed, though.
Yeah, maybe that could be, like, an interesting, like, kind of community initiative if RGL does really end up, like, tackling that.
RGL, please, for the love of God. Here's one other little minor complaint I've had about RGL in the past. I am the reason why one of the rules was outright removed from RGL, which was the rule that a player may not ring lower divisions just based on their division outright. So, for example, let's say I am an advanced demo man and I want to ring IM demo man. There used to be a rule in RGL that you could not ring 2 divs below you. Instead, that rule was removed and it's all based on approval. So if an admin or if a player, team leader says, "Yeah, that looks legit," I'd be allowed to ring. I don't like that. I think that having an outright no 2 divs above is healthy. You know why? Because my poor stupid amateur team I was mentoring once allowed 3 main players to ring because they just said, "Oh, ringers, yeah, cool."
I imagine that was a bit of an unpleasant experience for them.
Oh, that sucked. And immediately after, I went to add, and I'm like, "All right, RGL rulebook. I got two rules listed. Rule 1 listed: cannot ring 2 divs below. Rule 2 listed: anyone can ring based on team leader approval. So which is it, buddy?" And ad's like, "You got it," and just erased the rule that has the 2 divs above not allowed requirement.
So, how do you feel about the RGL divisions? Do you feel like the divisions are just like representative enough of the skill? Do you think do you think teams move up at tend to like outpace their own growth when it comes to moving up?
A lot of teams are very interested in moving up because they see moving up as improvement rather than seeing improvement as improvement. It's very easy to point to, "Wow, look at how much better I got because I was in amateur and now I'm in main, which is better."
Right.
A lot of people rush to move up divisions because they think that they have learned what they can from a division. I feel like part of the reason why is because of how poorly people treat people of lower divisions. They're like, "Amateur players, I'm an advanced player.
Right.
You'll understand me once you get up here."
Or even main players, like from advanced, or invite players into advanced. Yeah, no, definitely.
Everyone has this air of superiority as soon as they move up a little bit, and it's annoying. Like I've seen it in my own mentees, where like my own mentee moves from amateur to IM and then is immediately like mentoring amateur players. Now, I personally feel like you can get advice from any source and you may or may not be able to get good advice from it. I do think that amateur players may sometimes know more than their div, may know a lot more than their div typically knows. I also think that it's really bad to think that you've learned everything about your div just because you've escaped it.
Do you think maybe they just like don't have enough opportunity a lot of the time to like mentally mature for like what they're getting themselves into a lot of the time, and then maybe they find themselves like having trouble like getting into conflict with their teammates or blaming or just like dying because they're not necessarily prepared for it?
Yeah, so it's really hard for me to say because even though I mentor in amateur and IM and main and whatever, like even though I mentor in all of the divs, I don't know exactly what all of the divs are like in terms of what you encounter, what sort of pressure other teams put up and stuff. I do think that players are so anxious to move up because they don't want to plateau in a division. They don't want to be the person stuck. I do think that they aren't mature in terms of like the moment they move up, they're above this. I don't know. I don't really know exactly what causes the mindset of it, aside from just a fear of being stuck in one place like I used to be, but...
Right. I feel like that's something we used to see. I'm not sure how much these days, but I feel like we used to see that a lot with like advanced to main, like main players going into advanced. It just felt like maybe there was like unhealthy expectations kind of, and that like ended up really hurting them.
Yeah, and like the fact that you've jumped up a div, you're like, all right, I am now better than the previous div.
Right, and that's like, if your team dies, I feel like you would end up seeing like a lot of people just like kind of looking for teams around that range, and it's like there can only be so many teams, and it's like, if your team's not prepared, your team dies, then it's like, you don't necessarily want to go back down to main after you escape from it there, right? It's like you think you're above it, right? So then it's really hard for you to just keep progressing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure how much you see it that way nowadays, though. Sorry.
I don't know. It's just such an odd concept to me.
Yeah.
But I remember back when I went Iron Steel because I went Iron Steel, Controller Soldier, and then I switched to Demo on mouse and keyboard, so I went back to Iron, and then went to Steel afterward. And after that season, I'm like, I don't want to do Steel or Iron again. I want to go up. I'm not going to spend 5 seasons in this game and never go up. And I forced myself to jump up a div, and I wasn't ready for it. My team... We ended up getting 5th place, I think, but it was because of a lot of other teams dying and having really interesting wins on the teams that we did win against. And I had some toxic players that helped carry in spite of how much I disliked them. But that attitude I understand entirely of, like, I don't want to be, like, the forever blank div, you know?
Right. So what's
forever I am, forever main. And then... I got over it when I got into main silver, and I'm like, you know what? I was not ready for my initial jump. I don't think I belong in the div right now, so I'm going to just wait until I belong in this div, and then when I belong in this div, I will eventually get better at it till I win it. And then once I feel confident in this div, like I don't run into any super difficult challenges, I never feel like entirely over my head, then I will go up the next div. And yeah, so I've never really tried to make the push to invite. I've just been chilling. I'm learning at my own pace.
So what would your advice be for like players and teams and leaders to like avoid running into that issue?
Best advice I can give is just you are improving whether or not you're jumping up divs. As long as you're working on the things that you know are a problem because your teammates, your opponents, whoever has pointed out to you, maybe yourself, maybe you've noticed yourself that, like, I don't do this well. If you work on your issues, you are improving. You don't need a badge to prove it. You don't need to jump up a div to prove it. The point of the game should be improvement and fun. If you're not encountering either of those things, you're in the wrong div.
And do you think sticking to like one team or like set of players maybe would like help with that?
It helps and it hurts depending on what part of the team, or what season of the team you're in, you know?
Right.
So if a team has been together for 5 seasons, that's like when they're on the edge of just collapse. That's when their players have started to leave, when they've realized their team keeps running into the same problems and not improving them. But having a consistent team that you're okay with all saying, like, hey, I noticed that we have this issue, I noticed our medic has this issue, I noticed our scout has this issue. If you're able to say that to your team without starting an argument, then yes, you're in a team that is set up for success. If you are able to go to one of your teammates and say, hey, I really think that the way you're approaching this situation is leading us to being down players when they're pushing or whatever. If you're able to have those conversations without argument and just create solutions and move forward, you're going to get somewhere.
Okay.
If you are ever on a team that you can't do that with, you're not going to improve a lot on that team. You may improve independently, but your team will not improve as a whole.
Right. So,
best you can, put yourself into a situation where everyone understands that the criticism happening around is friendly. It's not a mean criticism.
And what do you say being in that sort of environment, just like working with the same team can really help you like find your own niche as a player, your own strengths and weaknesses, and really improve as yourself as well?
Oh, yeah. If you have a very stable team and everyone's good friends with each other, you could try out some really stupid stuff and it goes well, and I love it.
Right. Whereas like if you're like trying to like if you like kind of outpace your own team, like, well, not necessarily outpace, but if you feel like you're kind of like, I don't know, I guess just like moving up, right? Like after you win a div, let's say you like just split apart for the next season, look for a team in like the div above it, or like go second place. Mm-hmm. It might be really hard for you to kind of like find your own place in that team, right? Like it really might stunt your growth for a bit.
It could. It also can help.
That's true as well. That's all about the context.
I was on Kaboom Collective last season because they were good friends. They were always a really friendly team. I joined them because I knew that they were going to be respectful. But then when I was on their team, I realized internally they had a lot of problems that they weren't willing to talk about. And the criticism that was given was very harsh and not well received. And people were blaming. And there was a lot of, conversations behind each other's backs of like, oh, our medic is doing the bad stuff.
Right.
Our scout's not very good. You get those conversations going on around you, and you're like, okay, this is entirely dysfunctional. There's not much that can be done. The leader of that team, Task, he's a spy, was on that team since the beginning. So he was like amateur, IM, main, advanced, that team, always the same team. He left mid-season because he was just done. He had reached his limit. And the first message I said to him is, my guy, you made a fine decision. You made a decision for yourself. You felt stuck on that team. It is okay. You do not have to feel guilty about what you've done. I am never celebrating when a leader leaves a team mid-season, but I will always celebrate when a player has made a decision for themselves for the sake of themselves and their health and their,
Right.
That was the correct decision for Task to make. He should have left that team. He should have left that team before the season began, though. He should have left earlier, but that's okay. He needed to do so he can move on as a player because he kept running into his team's same problems. So as a spy, is he getting better? Is his team getting worse? Are they staying the same? He doesn't really know what his growth looks like outside of that team, so he needed another team to try it on. Especially a spy. Spy, it's really hard. It's such an independent class, everyone says, but, as a spy, sometimes your logs look god-awful, just, straight up garbage, and it's because your team never pressures anything for you. They never give you the opportunities. When you say, I'm going in and decloaking on this class, no one pushes that class. And it's really hard to see if you're making mistakes as spy, or if your team is not giving you the support distractions you require, so he needed that.
Right. Do you think something like the phenomena of just the div spreadsheets that we see these days maybe do harm? Do you think maybe they force players to negatively compare themselves to other people and be like, oh, I'm not as good as this player? Do you feel like maybe it makes their teams doubt them when combined with just more supportive classes?
It depends entirely on the people reading the spreadsheet. I know that my team, back when we were in main, there was a main spreadsheet going around, and the funniest thing to me is, I know I'm not the best demo of all time. I will never be super egotistical about my demo play. This spreadsheet was going around, and it's every time a team picked up a new demo, I dropped down a spot to make space for that demo to be above me. I'm like, oh, come on, guys, this is rude. It's just every person you find. Oh, who is this person? I have no idea. Well, are they better than Katrina? Well, probably. They just keep moving me down.
And you're fairly self-confident, though, right?
Oh, I don't freaking care. Yeah, I mean, I'm not self-confident. I definitely used to be really self-conscious about my demo play. I used to think I was one of the worst demos of all time. I might still be.
Right.
I probably am nowhere near the close. I'm probably closer to the worst demo of all time than I am to the best demo of all time, even without the numbers game, right?
Right. But let's say maybe
That's fine. I just think it's funny that literally every demo that they're oh, this one just moved up from IM. Oh, that probably better than Katrina. Just put them up above.
Anyway, so do you think maybe if it's in a lower division, though, when people are still growing more, maybe if they're not as self-confident, you could see the harm in it?
Yeah, I used to be really self-conscious about my demo play. It stemmed initially from having a rotten mentor that just made my success be reliant upon him and his advice and how well I was following it. If I did well in a scrimmage, it was because I was following his advice, and if I did poorly, it was because I was not following his advice. It was never about me.
Right.
So having that sort of perspective on my gameplay initially made me feel really self-conscious, because it was just if I couldn't be like him, then I was bad. I think for lower, if you haven't been around a lot, any criticism in the community could sound really, really harsh.
Right. Especially,
I know that if you go into it knowing the community is toxic and then being criticized, you could assume that criticism is toxicity when it isn't.
Right. Well, it's like I want to say something along the lines of like spreadsheets aren't really like the productive criticism, right? They're just like
They're
kind
not.
of they're kind of just like putting you down like a bit, right?
Oh yeah. I know that by the end of that season when we ended up winning but not winning grand finals, right? Like
Right.
I think I was still third when I was going into grand finals. I'm like, okay. You know what? Whatever. I know. It's fine. My Pyro was like always listed as like 4th or 5th. No one really knew what he contributed to the team unless you were part of the team. He was one of those Pyros that like you never had to worry about
Right.
spy, never had to worry about bombers. Did his logs look good? Hell no. But he did his job exceptionally well.
So
My soldier, Noble, love that guy to death. You could not tell him to not bomb. He was considered the best soldier. He had only one thing that he could do, and that was bomb. Could he hold space? No. He could bomb. It's like, literally, there was a time where my spy and I, we laid out everything. We're like, alright, we have Uberad. We're holding the point. We're getting close to 0 seconds left on the point. Their medic does not have. In fact, their medic just died. They are not preparing for a push. I say that. My soldier says, I'm gonna bomb their medic. And we're like, no, you're not. You're not going. And he's like, I'm bombing their medic. I killed their medic. I'm like, great, but that literally. What did we just say, Noble Note? What did we just say? He's like,
Hey,
their medic's dead. I'm like,
maybe he just doesn't want him to have buffs on the fight.
It's Asheville. We have ad. We're holding the point. Our whole team's alive. There was no reason to sack.
Maybe
And yet, there he goes.
they just need to have
Good
more
night,
disad.
Noble Note. He likes their medic being dead more often.
No.
He likes killing their medic. It was his favorite thing to do. We could not tell him to not bomb. He was listed as the best soldier. Do I think he was a great soldier? Fantastic. He was hilarious. He was great to work with. I'd love to have him on my team again. Was he a good soldier? Yes. Was he the best one in the div at the time? Absolutely not.
But do you think
he would bomb? He would bomb!
kind of reminds me of myself? I just jump around a lot.
Noble, no!
Noble, no.
Noble, no! Noble, yes.
But anyways, do you think, I don't know, it just like has more negative effects, like that sort of spreadsheet hyper focus and like culture, like just sort of that can, like, do you think maybe it has a negative effect besides on the player themselves, like maybe on how people perceive them, or maybe it's like it might make some individuals perform a lot less, like just due to maybe a lack of confidence, like it might really hurt their career as a player?
It could, depending on the player. Like, if it were around when I was new to the game, it probably would have hurt my feelings a lot.
Right. And
these days, I don't care.
Do you think they're hurting your feelings?
I don't think it matters at all right now.
Do you think you're like it hurting your feelings would like have potentially impacted your ability to grow and succeed as a player?
Yes, but also no, because I got to the point where I didn't care what other people thought, and that's when I got good. Like, okay. I got better as soon as I stopped taking every source of knowledge I could in and comparing my gameplay to it. When I just played and I felt myself make mistakes, it felt great to just learn from myself. So there was a point where it probably could have hurt my feelings, and then I eventually got over it, because I eventually got over everything.
Right.
Does it hurt new players now? It might, but I think that people need to get to the point where those things don't hurt their feelings. Like, part of my mentoring is to try to teach this philosophy of only compare yourself to your old self, only try to get better than you were. Accept your mistakes and failures, they are all your own. Whatever advice you take from me, and whatever you apply of my advice doesn't make you a better player because you listened to me. It made you a better player because you started doing things that worked, right? Like,
right.
So part of what I want to teach is, if a spreadsheet comes out and they're listed as dead last, to not care. That doesn't matter to you. If it does affect you that greatly, you are going to be a worse player. Because, like I was so hyper-focused on other people's stuff that I didn't care about my gameplay. Like, I wasn't looking at my improvements at all. I was just thinking about how I should be better than I am. That made me worse. When I if I saw a spreadsheet and it showed I was dead last, it would have made me very sad. But learning how to get over it and just approach every situation, no matter how toxic, no matter how much BM is being spewed. I don't like saying that. I work in healthcare. No matter how much is being said, that you can ignore it, focus on your gameplay, try to do well. You fail, you win, you win. Yeah. So
Right.
I want people to have some experience with bad criticism to learn how to ignore it, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I don't think that there should be a ban on spreadsheets and low divs because it will hurt people's abilities to improve.
Well,
I
you also
do think they
can't
should
really.
be taught to not listen to it.
You can't really just like ban the concept of spreadsheets anyways. No, I was just curious as to like the perception on it, yeah. Whether you think
Yeah.
like it's a beneficial thing, whether it's harmful.
It's a benefit and a harm, you know? Like, it will initially harm, but it long-term benefit if people are able to get over it. I don't want people to have bad experiences with mentors. I do want people to be able to get over bad criticism on their own. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think it's really criticism they necessarily learn from, though, unless they have other people kind of help guide them through it? Or is it more of just, oh, you're a bad player, and you never really get told why, if it's just from the spreadsheet there? Or, like, other people mocking you over it?
Well, that's kind of what I want, right? Like, if you are a new player of BlizzTank, and you receive the criticism, you are hot garbage. I want you as a new player, if you're one of my mentees and you come to me and you say, that made me feel like I suck, I would say, alright, that doesn't teach you anything. That didn't talk about how well you bomb, that did not talk about how well you trap things, how well you're able to hold shutters, how
Right.
well you're able to DPS for your team. Therefore, you throw that hot garbage out the window, yeah? You
I
don't
see,
listen
yeah.
to that one. Now, if someone came to you and they're like, man, you suck at bombing, that's something that you can at least take something from. Like, if you have a bomb and you fail really hard and the other team sends Lamau, our medic, was able to arrow you out of the sky, at least it's something you can work with. You're like, alright, there's a nugget of wisdom in there. That is the, maybe I need to bomb with a little bit less of the straightforward, or maybe I need to bomb with other people so that they can correct for when I fail, right?
Right, and it's just like, maybe like the presence of spreadsheets kind of inclines people to just like silently judge you on that, or just like the whole culture of just like not really getting into confrontation makes them more likely to just resort to something like that, rather than just directly telling you maybe what they think and what maybe you need to improve on. It's kind of what I'd be getting at.
Yeah, so the other thing, though, is that I also don't tell people to actively seek out the other team for advice. Like, some teams you can come in contact with, you become friends with them, and you can share advice for their players. Like, I found it readily easy to stab your medic and all that. But if you don't have that sort of friendship set up already, what it sounds like is, you know, your spy sends a message to the enemy team leader and says, your medic's really stabbable. That was such a stabbable back. Got so many frags. My logs look so good.
Delicious.
Like, that doesn't sound like criticism, even though it may come across as friendly. And if you ask the other team for advice, you may be opening yourself up to that sort of behavior. But, you know, you have to learn the people. If it's alright with you, I will be right back really quick. I just need some water,
Sure, yeah.
I've been talking a lot.
I'll just have like a few closing questions left anyways, unless you end up having some that you like want to ask and answer for yourself, yeah. Alright, we are back.
Alrighty.
So next question. So previously you talked about how you kind of disagreed with the office's method of doing things, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever like thought about the idea of making like your own sort of like mentoring group, or just like place for kind of people to collaborate on that sort of stuff with a different approach or atmosphere, or do you think that would just end up running into like the same issues the office had by nature?
Absolutely not doing it, because it'll end up being the same as the office. The last thing I want is for my mentees to feel like they're entirely beneath me having to attend a class to be good like me.
No, but like, do you think there is no way to just like make something still kind of like collaborative without having that atmosphere involved? Like without it being as much of equals?
It's possible, I just have never wanted to Like that's not. I don't want it to be a separate thing that their teammates have to attend, and along with all of my other mentees. That's another thing.
Well,
I will mention that I don't really like. I've had some people mentor in the past, and they're like, okay, I'm currently mentoring 6 teams in IM, and the ones doing well are the ones that have me mentor twice a week, whereas the ones that are doing poorly are the ones that hardly ask me for map reviews and stuff.
well,
That nature of, like, I have a billion mentees, and I definitely care about all of them, and I'm just not just using their success to feel good about myself.
Well, what about something along the lines of just, like, not necessarily a mentoring Discord, but, like, just a place where, like, a lot of, like, the mentors, like, people who partake in those sort of community things together, like, could just have, like, collaborate a bit, not necessarily, like, doing, like, mentoring through it directly, though, but just, like, a place for them to kind of, like, keep on the same page and talk about stuff, talk about classes, and sort of just, like, share insight.
I'm all for that sort of thing. I just don't want... The last thing I want is for a bunch of mentees to feel like they're entirely beneath a chunk of the community because they have the certain tag in that Discord,
But would the latter be ever is the latter something you thought about, like, ever doing, or do you think it would be something that would be beneficial?
God, it's far too late for me to start something like that at this point.
That's fair, yeah. Last season of TF2, right?
Probably, yeah. But no, my contributions to the community will always remain my teams and the teams that have asked me to mentor. I've never wanted to make a lasting impact on the meta itself by having a continuous collaborative discussion site. Not that I don't talk about that stuff with my teammates anyway. I mean, I talk with my teammates and I'm like, Pyros have shifted to more aggressive gameplay these days, haven't they? And they're like, yeah, I see a lot of Pyros bombing on Nashville and whatever. Like, there's those sorts of conversations, but I've never opened it up to the greater community.
Right.
My Discord will always remain a place where it's been teammates and friends of teammates, and I moderate it with an iron fist and have the final say on everything. I don't have broad open Discords up to a bunch of unknown people, having conversations about TF2 topics. I don't know. It might be an idea for some other people. If I was invited, I'd be happy to talk. I don't really go out of my way to do that, though.
Do you think that'd be, like, something beneficial to the community?
It could be. It really depends on how it turns out, who gets involved.
Right. I just feel like maybe something like that could help build a sense of community, kind of.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like that'd be very helpful. So how do you feel about the current, like, RGL newcomer, or, like, the lower division admins? Do you know much of them? Do you hear much about them from your mentees? Do they seem to be doing a good job? Kind of.
Yeah, basically all I could talk about is Jerser, which I don't know much about what she has done for newcomer or amateur, whichever one she worked with. I forgot, I'm sorry. But what I can say is I don't know the low division admins very much. I do tell my mentees to talk to the admins. They sometimes don't give me the, what happened in that discussion. A lot of the times I've told my mentees to open a ticket, and then I send a message to Will Maddock, and he's like, okay, what did you send me this time? Why did you do this to me? I'm like, it's fine, I just know you're the only person able to listen to a support ticket right now. Yeah, so I've known a little bit of Oz happenings in the lower divs, and that it was taken care of by admins at some point. I guess that's one situation I could talk about. There was a player that I was mentoring very briefly, and let me be honest, I don't consider myself friends with this person because I'm pretty sure I got them cut from their team. Yeah, I did. Okay, I got this person cut from their team because they were egotistical, and I told them, like, you're gonna want a different Pyro. This Pyro is not listening to instructions. He's acting like he's more important than the rest of the team. He doesn't take blame for medic deaths or anything, right? Like, independent, right? And this player, after I get him cut, he is friends with person I'm mentoring still, sends a message to this person, and then that person sends a message to me, and they're like, all right, really, really, really weird situation we need advice on right frickin' now. I'm like, okay, what's up? And they're like, okay, so this friend of mine, the pyro that I got cut, he has been accused of pedophilia. And I'm like, what? And they're like, okay. I am 16. This person is also 16. They sent me nudes against my will that I didn't want when I was mentoring them. And they have accused me of pedophilia, and I'm getting a lot of harassment from a bunch of Discords I'm in. I have been kicked from a few. I am losing my entire community, friends, everything. And I'm like, okay. I honestly don't know if this is something you talk to admins about or something, but I am sending a message to Willmatic. And I sent a message to Willmatic. I'm like, hey, here's the situation. Explain the situation. He's like, that is something that we would want to have note of, right? We do want this to be talked about in a support ticket. So I sent them to put in a support ticket, and they were protected in that situation because they were able to describe their side of the story, explain everything preemptively before it got to RGL, and then when they were reported to RGL had already known that this was about to happen and put their foot down. I don't know if Will dealt with that, whatever admin dealt with that, but that was dealt with quite well.
Okay.
The only other thing I could say, though, is that I remember, so I was, my team didn't make it to playoffs. I was going to ring for a team. Someone posted, looking for ringer pyro. I asked what div. They told me amateur. I said I couldn't because it's amateur, and they're like, or I am, I think. And I'm like, I can't. They're going to see advanced and say no. And they said, please do it anyway. And I'm like, I can't. I don't really understand why you think that I can. I would have to be approved. They're going to say no. So I said that to them. And then one of my former mentees who was on that IM team they were playing against was like, no, we are not letting you ring Cat. And I'm like, I wasn't even trying to. I said that if it's IM, I can't. And they sent the RGL profile anyway. He's like, oh, okay. And I'm like, I'm going to get an admin involved in this situation right now, though, okay? Because, like, this team is obviously helplessly confused. And he's like, oh, Jerser is on our team. Jerser is an admin. They're handling it now. And I said, handling it how? This poor enemy team is desperate to find a ringer because they think they have to forfeit. You have an admin on your team. An admin that's quote-unquote handling it. And this team is begging me to play for them. If there is an actual admin on the team, they'd say, alright, got this. So, you're gonna need to find a ringer that fits well with the div. Let me help you find one. And that's it! What the hell? You have an admin on the team, and this poor team still feels like they're gonna have to forfeit? They should be talking about reschedule. Right? Like, that made me upset. Like, I had some faith in Jerser, and then all of a sudden my faith just dropped to 0, because it's like, if an admin is there, this team shouldn't be panicking. And she wasn't the div admin either, so she should have gotten someone else involved. Anyway, that's just my nitpicking on admins.
Okay, so what do you think RGL needs to improve on most?
In my opinion, I'm just coasting along. I don't have a whole lot of opinions on what they should do about advanced, what they should do with challenger. Qualifier is always a crap show. I don't have any opinions on that. I don't really care. I am along for the ride, having a fun time. What I think they should be working on is improving the lower divs and helping teams feel like they can improve, players move up, that sort of thing. And that's where those like better instructions to newcomer teams on how to actually post LFTs, LFPs, get players together, play consistently for scrimmages, not ring invite players, not ring invite players, you know?
Yeah.
Those are the things that I think that they should be working on that I actually care about. Everything else, it's always been out of my hands what's going on in invite, advanced, qualifier nonsense. That area has been so broken for so long, and I have stopped caring. I'm just gonna chill. They're gonna place me in a div. I'm gonna play in that div. It'll be fun.
Okay. Do you have any questions you want to like ask and answer yourself?
Not any that I can think of off the top of my head. Oh, I've got one. Right. Everybody listen up. What new game mode needs to be added for a joke tournament or something? Answer 10v10, 1 demo knight, 1 demo man per team. Full demo knight has to have sword, shield, right? Boots, no explosives. Demo man must have full explosives, no sword, no shield. We see how it goes. It'll be dumb as hell. Please make it a joke tournament. I would love to participate.
Dumb is good. Okay.
I would love to have a freaking demo night on the flank along with my flank. Can you imagine?
That'd be so fun. Yeah, maybe they could like they could join in on the bombs.
Yeah, the sack waves would be incredible. Like the medic would have to force every sack wave. It would be so funny.
Yeah.
10v10 and comms would just be the extra amount of chaos that everyone requires. Like, throw that in, please. Make this... I've been talking about this joke game mode to everyone, and no one has ever followed up on it. Very disappointed.
I think it's worthwhile. We should make a new league for that.
We should make a new league.
The Joke Gaming League.
It's a Highlander gaming mode that actually has a sword and a shield in it. There you go.
It's more inclusive. Includes everything.
More inclusive.
Do you have any people you think should that would be interested to be interviewed?
Will Maddock would. I'm pretty sure he'd be up for it. He is definitely worth talking to about this RGL stuff, provided he wants to or is allowed to talk about it.
Okay.
Aside from that, a representative from B&H like Grin or Paul would be a good one because they've been so consistent in the community forever and they have such an outside perspective. They're both, well, not both. Paul is a very, very quiet person and would probably decline, but Grin would probably be up for it and talking about just having such a consistent community that has been relatively playing together for 10 seasons.
Right. Any people you want to spotlight? Shout out, rather. Ugh.
That's alright. The spotlight on, well, all of my old teammates, wonderful people. My mentees that I've had have generally been wonderful. There was that one team that we don't talk about. I don't know. I guess if I was to shout out, it would be the Cloud9 community, the B&H community. They have been wonderful. Fastco, if anyone's still alive from that era, good job, Fastco. You guys are doing great.
How about, like, community figures, admins?
Well, Maddock, I still respect you. Asian, very happy for him to be an admin these days. He's gonna do great, or moderator. He's gonna do great. Joey Lemons has always been good at his job. I've never disagreed with his thoughts on things. Yeah, I think those are the big ones.
Okay. And then anything else?
Well, thank you very much for interviewing me. I am happy to be wasting your time on this pleasant Wednesday.
No time is wasted in this.
Very good. If you have any other questions for me at any later point in time, you can always have an addendum. I'm fine talking forever. I'm a woman. I talk a lot. It's fine.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, I should be playing medic. No, I haven't done it yet. Will I sell out my last season? Sure, why not? Let's be a medic.
What about Pyro though? What about Pyro?
Pyro? Oh shoot, I could. I'd suck at it, but I am a female, so I certainly could try.
Yeah.
In case any RGL admins are listening and want me banned for saying very disrespectful to female things, I am not disrespectful to females, and I'm fine making jokes at myself. Okay.
Okay. I welcome my soon-to-be-had
You're
anti-RGL
gonna be
ban.
demonetized, yeah.
I don't have anybody from this anyways, but I'm prepared for my RGL ban. Anti-RGL activities.
I'm gonna be RGL banned in my last season for being disrespectful to women. Oh my lord, that'd be so funny. Please let it happen. Where
Okay.
are you, Will Maddock? Please ban me.
I think on that note, I think it's a good time to just
Yeah, you should stop before I say
yeah.
anything worse, yeah.
Goodbye.